When three wealthy women entered an upscale restaurant. They expected flawless service. But what they didn't expect was the man serving their table. Their snide remarks and cruel laughter aimed at the humble waiter would soon backfire in a way they never imagined. Stay tuned to see how this gripping story unfolds. And while you're here, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. The dimly lit interior of La Royale, one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants, gleamed with sophistication. Marble tabletops, golden chandeliers, and perfectly arranged floral centerpieces set the stage for an evening of exclusivity. The air was filled with the aroma of truffles, aged wine, and fresh rosemary from the open kitchen. Catherine Hayes entered, her designer dress shimmering under the ambient lighting. Her friends, Olivia and Brooke, followed close behind, their laughter cutting through the refined murmur of the room. As the maitre d' escorted them to a prime corner table, they exchanged glances, soaking in the envious stares of other diners. They were here to celebrate Catherine's latest social achievement, a charity gala she had hosted. Catherine leaned back in her chair, examining the wine list with a critical eye. "Ladies," she began, "this place has a reputation to uphold. Let's hope they don't disappoint." As their waiter approached, tray in hand, Catherine didn't yet know that this evening would take an unexpected turn. What could possibly disrupt her perfect night? Ethan Clark, a young waiter with a warm but quiet demeanor, approached the table with their wine. Dressed impeccably in his crisp uniform, he greeted the women with professionalism. "Good evening, ladies. May I pour the wine?" he asked politely. Catherine barely looked up, gesturing dismissively. "Just don't take all night." Ethan nodded, maintaining his composure as he poured the wine. His hand wavered slightly, and a single drop of red wine splashed onto the pristine marble tabletop. Catherine gasped audibly, placing her hand dramatically on her chest. "Are you serious?" she exclaimed, her tone sharp enough to turn nearby heads. "Is this your first day? I can't believe I have to deal with this kind of incompetence in a place like this." Olivia and Brooke laughed, adding fuel to the fire. "Maybe they pulled him in off the street." Brooke quipped, "Honestly, Catherine, you should speak to the manager." Ethan quickly grabbed a cloth, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me clean this up right away." Catherine snatched the cloth from his hands. "Don't bother. You've done enough. Someone else should be serving us, someone who knows what they're doing." Ethan froze, his face burning with humiliation. Other diners turned to watch the unfolding scene, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. Catherine smirked, basking in the attention, but she didn't notice a tall figure approaching their table from the kitchen, ready to intervene. Isaiah Clarke stood in the open kitchen, watching the scene unfold from his vantage point. He could see the humiliation on his brother Ethan's face as Catherine berated him in front of her friends and the other diners. A sharp pang of anger rose in his chest, but he took a deep breath, steadying himself. This wasn't the first time someone like Catherine had walked into his restaurant expecting the world to revolve around them, only to leave a trail of disrespect in their wake. Ethan was new to the job, eager to learn and committed to excellence. Isaiah knew how much it meant for his younger brother to work at La Royale, not just because it was his restaurant, but because it was a chance for Ethan to prove himself in a space known for its high standards. Watching Ethan stand there, eyes cast down as Catherine and her friends mocked him, was too much for Isaiah to ignore. He thought back to the early days of building La Royale, when he and Ethan worked side by side to renovate the space that would become one of Manhattan's premier dining destinations. Ethan had painted the walls, helped design the menus, and even taste-tested dishes late into the night. To Isaiah, this wasn't just about defending his brother. It was about standing up for the values that La Royale was built upon: respect, hard work, and dignity. Isaiah wiped his hands on his apron, his decision clear. He wasn't just going to let this slide. He wasn't going to allow Catherine's behavior to tarnish the environment he'd worked so hard to create. This was a teaching moment for Catherine, her friends, and everyone watching. Isaiah took a deep breath and stepped out of the kitchen, his eyes fixed on Catherine's table. It was time to remind her and the entire dining room what La Royale truly stood for. Isaiah approached the table with measured strides, his presence commanding but calm. The murmur of the restaurant quieted as diners noticed the imposing figure of the restaurant owner stepping into the spotlight. Catherine leaned back in her chair, her smirk fading slightly as she caught sight of his expression, firm, unyielding, and deeply disappointed. "Good evening, ladies," Isaiah began, his voice low and steady yet loud enough to carry through the room. "I understand there's been an issue at this table." Catherine crossed her arms, attempting to regain her composure. "Yes, there has. Your waiter," she emphasized the word as if it were beneath her, "has been completely incompetent. He spilled wine on the table and couldn't even manage a simple task without making a mess. Honestly, it's unacceptable for a place of this caliber." Olivia and Brooke exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier laughter now replaced with visible discomfort. Isaiah nodded slowly, his gaze moving to Ethan, who stood a few steps back, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. Turning back to Catherine, Isaiah's voice grew sharper, though still controlled. "That waiter you're speaking about is my brother." Catherine blinked, her face faltering for a moment before she quickly masked it with feigned indifference. "Oh, well, that explains a few things," she said, attempting to chuckle, but her voice lacked confidence. Isaiah didn't flinch. "It explains that he works harder than most people I've met in this industry, that he's here every day giving his best to ensure that guests like you have an exceptional experience." He paused, his tone growing heavier. "And yet you felt it was appropriate to humiliate him over a single drop of wine." Brooke shifted uncomfortably, looking down at her hands. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she muttered. Isaiah's eyes darted to her. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding. I heard everything from the kitchen." He turned back to Catherine. "Respect is not a luxury we offer to select customers. It's the foundation of this restaurant. And if you can't treat my staff with that same respect, then you don't belong here." The silence was deafening. Catherine opened her mouth, struggling to respond. But Isaiah wasn't done. "You came here expecting perfection. But perfection isn't just about polished service or flawless dishes. It's about the way we treat one another, with dignity, with kindness. My brother may have spilled a drop of wine, but you've spilled far more tonight: grace, decency, and character." The room erupted in applause, breaking the tension as other diners voiced their support. Catherine's face burned with embarrassment as she realized all eyes were on her. Olivia and Brooke exchanged nervous glances, clearly regretting their involvement. Isaiah took a step back, his piercing gaze still locked on Catherine. Would she admit her mistake or dig herself into an even deeper hole? The weight of Isaiah's words hung in the air as the applause gradually died down. Catherine sat frozen in her chair, her usual confidence replaced by visible discomfort. She looked to Olivia and Brooke for support, but they avoided her gaze, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Finally, Catherine forced a tight smile, her voice shaky. I didn't mean to come across that way. It was just a misunderstanding. I can assure you, I have the utmost respect for your staff." Isaiah raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanged. "Respect isn't something you claim after the fact, Miss Hayes. It's something you show in your actions. Tonight, your actions have told a very different story." Catherine's smile faltered, and she reached for her glass of wine as if to distract herself. Olivia, sensing the growing tension, tried to smooth things over. "I think what Catherine meant was—" Isaiah held up a hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. "Let's not make excuses for behavior that speaks for itself." His voice softened slightly, though it remained firm. "This restaurant exists because of people like my brother, who work tirelessly to ensure everyone feels welcome. No one's above that, no matter their wealth or status." Ethan, who had been standing silently nearby, finally stepped forward, his voice quiet but steady. "Thank you, chef," he said, his gaze meeting Isaiah's. "I appreciate you standing up for me." Isaiah turned to his brother, his expression softening for the first time. "You didn't deserve any of that, Ethan. You handled yourself with grace, and I'm proud of you." A few diners began clapping again, the sound spreading through the room. Catherine's cheeks flushed crimson as she glanced around. Realizing the room was firmly on Isaiah and Ethan's side, she leaned forward, her tone now more subdued. I'd like to apologize," Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't thinking. I let my frustration get the better of me." Isaiah studied her for a moment before nodding. "Apology accepted. But remember this, we're all human, and mistakes happen. What matters is how we respond to them." Brooke, clearly eager to leave, chimed in. "We really are sorry. This has been a lesson for all of us." Isaiah nodded again, this time addressing the entire table. "Good. Let it be a lesson for everyone here. Success doesn't excuse disrespect, it demands humility." As Isaiah turned to leave, he caught Ethan's eye and gave him a small, encouraging nod. The restaurant gradually returned to normal, though the air was still charged with the impact of what had just unfolded. Catherine sat back in her chair, staring at her untouched wine. Would she truly learn from this moment, or would her pride get the better of her once again? As Catherine sat in silence, the other diners began to clap, a few even standing in support of Isaiah and his team. Ethan walked away with his head held high, his confidence restored. As Isaiah returned to the kitchen, he glanced back at Ethan and gave him a small nod. The restaurant buzzed back to life, but the lesson of the night lingered. Respect isn't reserved for those in power, it's for everyone. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up against disrespect? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales of justice and humility.